Have you heard about the ancient illegal donkey Jesus? If you frequently peruse either historical or religious social media, you probably have. Well, it might feel more appropriate for the crucifixion's first visual documentation to have been done by a trained artist with the best intentions. It appears that instead, Christ's death was first illustrated by snickering schoolboys. Archaeologists discovered the wall carving in a building suspected to be some kind of educational center in ancient Rome, likely in the range of 50 to 250 AD. The plaster graffiti shows a boy with one arm raised facing a man with the head of a donkey who's mounted on a cross. Underneath is the inscription, Alexamenos worships his god. Apparently, a rumor about early Christians was that they worshipped an ass-like deity. The mocking graffiti was not taken without response. As far as we can tell from the walls, there were no rude remarks aimed in the other direction, no insults hurled or fists thrown. The walls only tell us of one more part of this story. In a room nearby the one which held the blasphemous image are two words, Alexamenos Fidelis, meaning Alexamenos is faithful. The donkey image had been talked about by archaeologists for a decade before Alexamenos' response was ever found. Graffiti today is no different. Its reputation is destructive, lawless, and foolish. What is most often observed is its irreverence. But if we're willing to search for them, to look in the room nearby, Christians are responding to this irreverence with bright and colorful messages of the church's continual faithfulness. Gospel Graffiti Crew is an international collective of graffiti artists who are using graffiti as a tool to evangelize and to celebrate the gospel. Cameron Moberg, or his tag, Camer1, with 1 as the number 1, has been a part of the crew for over 20 years and is based in San Francisco.
So Gospel Graffiti is the first Christian graffiti crew when you define it with urban graffiti terms. There was a guy who went by Snow, and he had recently became a Christian. Another guy named Phasm, they were eating somewhere in San Jose, and Phasm was a Christian too and a graffiti writer, and Snow was writing like gospel graffiti on a napkin, like they were at lunch and he was just tagging it. Phasm was like, why don't we make this a crew? So then Phasm built the website, turned it into a crew. And we even had one of the first online graffiti forums. So in graffiti culture, there was a big one back in the day called 12 Ounce Profit. And it was a hub for like meeting other graffiti artists. And it was mostly used just to talk crap. Like everybody just talk crap on there. Where we had one almost at the same time. Like Phasm didn't even copy 12 Ounce. I think they were just forums were starting to become a thing. So we had a Christian forum, and that's how we would meet a lot of Christian artists around the world. And this was before MySpace and all that, Facebook and stuff like that. So I knew of the crew in 98, I think. I knew of Phasm before the crew. And then I started painting with them like maybe in 2000. And then I think I got in the crew around 2001.
Crews, according to Cameron, are an essential part of graffiti culture.
From the beginning, there was crews.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, for example, a friend of mine, he was a first generation breakdancer in the Bronx when breakdancing was getting invented, right? He was 12 years old when he started breakdancing, and he was the first gen, right? His breakdancing crew, basically, he had no parents. He didn't have a mom or dad. Most of his friends, if they had a parent, it would be a mom. And they lived in, he lived in one of those abandoned buildings in the Bronx just in a random room, right? So his crew became like different friends that lived in that abandoned building or throughout the neighborhood. Basically, it was your group of friends, you know, whether they were your friends just for fun or you protect each other or whatever. That's kind of how crews started. Crews have always been a part of graffiti. And for us as Christians, it was more about a like-minded group of individuals with a collective goal. And it's still what we do now. It's a way to support each other. It's a way to recognize skill in someone and to push each other. We do think that our friends in Australia kind of coined this term, but they say that skills is currency. So if you're not good, then who's going to listen to you? So being in a crew does push you. It makes you get better if everybody is working hard. It's not about the fame. It's not about just getting better for the sake of getting better. But the better I've gotten as an artist, the more opportunity I have to rub elbows with graffiti artists who respect what I do. Right. So being in a crew does help that. And now, after all these years, our crew does have a name even in the secular environment. So people know who Gospel Graffiti is, not just because we're the Christian crew. Used to be that way. We used to just be the people that get made fun of. But now we're known as the Christian crew, and we have really good artists in the crew because we'll go to a secular event and do just as good or better than a lot of the people there, because we're really pushing each other.
Camera One is very aware that Christianity and graffiti are things that, in most people's minds, don't mix.
In the 90s and early 2000s, we very much felt that the non-Christians thought we were weird for doing Christian graffiti, and then the church thought it wasn't acceptable. So we were kind of in this world in between, and it definitely experienced that. And I think for us, we just didn't care. Like this, why would we change what we do and how we express ourselves artistically? It's almost like missionaries who go to another country and they don't just present Jesus, but they teach people how they should worship, which I don't agree with. Like, we should share Jesus, but whatever their culture is and their way of life is how they should respond to who Jesus is. Like their culture should lift up the name of God. And I feel very similar with graffiti. Like, this is our culture. This is our upbringing. This is, if we're going to naturally be who we are in Jesus, then we should be able to naturally worship and evangelize with our art form. So I think that's why we just didn't care. Our goal was never to minister to the church for us. It was to be a presence amongst non-Christians, and along the way, if it encourages Christians, that's cool too.
The belief that Christ meets us where we are and sanctifies our interests is key to why Camera One does what he does.
When you live in your natural state of worship, which I would argue that you could go to church on Sunday and sing and not worship God. Like, you could just be going through the motions, right? But I think a natural state of worship is what that is like when you recognize and trip out on the gospel. Like if you meditate on what the gospel is for you and how crazy it is, however you would naturally respond to that is your natural state of worship. So for us, oftentimes it's painting, it's drawing, might not be singing, right? But when you live in your natural state of worship, when you wake up every day and you're recognizing who God is, and then you're responding to God, that's what worship is how do you respond to God? And when you live in that natural state of worship, your life naturally becomes evangelism. We don't have to force evangelism. We can set times, But I do think, like, as long as you're tripping out on the gospel, those things will happen. And I think sometimes we try to put those things in boxes and say this is for Sunday, or this outreach going to happen this week. But I do believe that Jesus lived in a natural state of worship and evangelism. It was just him kicking it with his homies. Who was he going to run out into on the street? And it just flowed from his life, you know? So I do hope that people see Gospel Graffiti, and if they see anything from us, I hope that's what they see in us. It's just us being us. That's it.
The outlook that crew members have on how God can use what they do is not completely uniform. There's diversity of ministry.
While we do have members, it's more of a movement to us, and like a way of encouraging others in graffiti that may have given their life to Christ to feel like they're not alone, or presenting the gospel. I mean, in essence, it's spreading the gospel through graffiti. Like, in the simplest terms, that's what we do. Some of us think that means painting a very blatant Christian mural, like a Jesus graffiti piece. And that's what some of our members feel called to do, while others may feel more inclined to, they might feel that it's very important to have one-on-one discussions with other graffiti artists. So sometimes it doesn't work with a blatantly Christian mural, right? You just want to paint good so that you are invited to paint with other people, so that you could be an influence in their life one-on-one. So we all do it different ways. I would say that's the simplest thing, is throughout the year, we're encouraging each other to spread the gospel through graffiti. With that said, though, we've taken some shifts over the years on how we do that as a group. Around 2003, we started doing graffiti missions trips. So we would meet once a year in one of the countries where one of us lived, because right now we have, I think, 35-ish members in 9 different countries. So we would have one kind of take the lead and say, I want to do ministry in my city, in my part of the world. Whoever wants to come this year, I'll plan it. So that person might schedule painting at schools or nonprofits. It might be a very Christian experience, like working with churches. Others might like to go paint at a secular graffiti event, and they want to reach like the non-churched. So we did these graffiti mission trips every August, and we would call it our August event, but with 2 G's for Gospel Graffiti.
The question of how closely Christians ought to follow the law is a very big one in many Christian communities, and the graffiti community is no different.
It's very complicated, because then you'll get people who are like, well, Scripture says obey the laws of the land. And I'm like, well, I know you just drove 85 to get to my house today. You know, like, so it's like, it becomes so legalistic at some point. So this has actually been a debate in our group. So this is something we're discussing now. We were very strict on this, and some of our members are still very strict on absolutely only legal walls. I think this was important to us in the beginning because graffiti has so much to do with fame. And as Christians, we want to push aside any concept of pride and fame. We want to counter that. And some of us think now that painting legally or illegally has nothing, it's not going to change. You could paint a legal wall and still struggle with pride and fame, right? So this is being talked about and debated. And we've also come to learn that, like, depending where you live changes a lot of that aspect, right? Like, a lot of our members who live in other countries, there's so many walls that aren't technically legal, but everybody paints them. And so it's just, there's not been a law created around it that determines if it's legal or not. So I don't know where we're at with that right now. Even for myself, like I look at the train painting scene, like the freight train scene. That used to be something very taboo. It was looked at as destructive. And now the collective feel around freight trains is people love them, right? Like people sit at a stop watching trains go by and the kids in the back seat love it. Like the freight yards, the workers will barbecue for graffiti artists while everybody paints freight trains. So there's the culture has shifted. And I think at some point, everybody's on their own individual journey. And what is the Holy Spirit doing to you as a person? Where for me personally, I was very convicted in the beginning to only do legal work because the nature of graffiti for me was very destructive, right? So I had to completely go the other end and only do legal work because I was really destroying. Whereas now I might look at an illegal piece as, am I enhancing the space? Am I making it worse? Or am I offending somebody? Am I hurting a business owner? Like, what am I doing in that process? So I don't think it's a black and white issue, You might talk to other members in our crew, though, who hands down 100% disagree with me. And they'll say it's legal. It's very obvious, right? Just to make that clear. But that's why we love our crew, too. Like,
Totally.
People we're open in the dialogue. Everyone's talking. We're all different types of Christians in the crew, like different secondary doctrine. Like, to me, it's like what the church is supposed to be. That's our crew, and it's really dope.
The crew might have disagreements, but the relationships are distinctly collaborative and helpful in the graffiti community.
One of my favorite stories is there's a big graffiti event in St. Louis, and it's called Paint Louis. And it's a wall that's 2 miles long, and hundreds of graffiti artists come from all over the world. And so we felt pressed to do an August event there, one of our, yearly ministry events. So because we had the most amount of people, they basically block out like 20 feet per person. And we brought like 12 people. So we just have this massive spot. And they roll your name out really big on the wall to save your spot. So it says Gospel Graffiti, and we come in and we just hear people making fun of us, talking crap. What is this Christian graffiti crew coming in? We worked really well together. We had been doing it for so many years. So that alone, just seeing our execution of how to paint a wall together, people seeing our process, that alone is ministry. Like, they wonder why we work so well together. Well, we know we're all different. We have to work through our problems, and we've been doing it for years, right? Secondly, like, we got done ahead of everybody, so we would send out different artists to go help other people with their walls. Thirdly, the message on that wall, one side said faith, or said fame, which is the whole subject in graffiti is fame, right? It said fame, and it was like black and white tags, and we call them throw ups, like the bubble letters of like all these names. And then the other side said faith, and it was full color pieces, just bright and vibrant. So just that subject matter of fame or faith, I had to speak to people. It was very clear. And then lastly, the organizer told everybody, please don't tag all over St. Louis. They'll shut us down. People did it anyway. So there was threats of them getting shut down. So our crew organized. We were able to call churches and ask them to go work with organizer and volunteer to go clean up a lot of the tags and graffiti that were unwanted. So that, to the organizer alone, we hope and pray that would have spoke to him,
Gospel Graffiti Crew boasts members from all over the world, including Australia, Spain, Canada, Mexico, the US, the Netherlands, and South Africa. However, much of the crew's time, energy, and money has been dumped into one country in particular, Guatemala. Yes. Guatemala.
We did this for a long time, and then it's kind of taken a shift recently in multiple ways. We were really praying for us needing a younger generation of people in our crew that could have breathed new life into what we were doing. And we were praying for that for a long time. A lot of the guys were getting older, had families. It was getting a little difficult to plan. So with that prayer over the years, it's kind of crazy. This was the first time this has ever happened with our crew, but we online met some people who had never done graffiti before ever. The only reason they started doing graffiti was because they saw gospel graffiti and they wanted to learn graffiti to present the gospel. Before that, it was people did graffiti, they became Christians, they found our crew. That's how it always was. So with this incident, this group was down in Guatemala and they were killing it. They were doing so good. Their graffiti was getting really good. So we slowly started like having members go down there to meet them. And then over the years, that has become our focus in the last few years. So right now, our crew, we tithe to Guatemala to pay rent on a warehouse. And this warehouse has become a gathering place for young adults where they learn how to do graffiti or rap or DJ or skateboard. It's become like a educational hub. And then from there, they get brought out to the villages or the red zones where it's like impoverished and might have a lot of gangs. And then we bring these arts out to the communities in Guatemala. So that's one way we're doing it right now.
Emmanuel Roscoe, who goes by Solar, is one of the main organizers for Gospel Graffiti's events in Guatemala. And as if Christians doing graffiti didn't perplex enough, Solar is also a practicing medical doctor.
But I remember that when they asked me about it, it was like thinking about two things. You know, like saving lives, and art. You know, those are like the things that I really enjoy. I really like graffiti, you know. So here in Guatemala, we're like years behind that kind of art. So I started to paint like 12 years ago.
Okay.
And when I was getting into the graffiti world and that kind of culture, I was like doing it because I really like to paint and drawing, you know. So after that, I was like just drawing at the first time. Then when I had to go to the city, Guatemala City, for to keep the university studying, I needed to move to the city. So once I was there in the city, I got a friend from the church, and he was like, I always carried my sketchbook with me. So at that time at the church, there was a friend, and he was like, let me see your sketchbook. I show him. So after that, he was like, I really like what you do. I really like your work. Have you tried something like this before? And he just take out his phone and he showed me some graffiti pieces. So that was kind of my first time with graffiti, you know. So after that, it was like, oh my God, I really like that, you know, like painting and drawing with that really big scale. So I was so excited. I went back home and I started to like look for it in the internet. At that time, it was kind of hard to like find that kind of information, like how to do graffitis and that kind of stuff. But after that, I started like to paint and do graffitis because of me, you know, like I really like to paint and that kind of stuff. But after that, I've been involved in church almost my whole life. So my mom and my dad, they're Christians. So they were like, since I was a little, they took me to church every Sunday, you know, that kind of things. After that, it was like, I started like painting and do some stuff illegally. Then like 6-8 months after that, I was like getting a message from God like, what are you doing with what this? I know you like drawing, I know you like painting, but what are you thinking of to do about this with this? I mean, so it was like, oh man, that's okay. So after I was like, okay, I really like to do this. I really want to get pro with this. So I started like, what can I do with graffiti now? Like, I can do a message, a Christian message. I can like share the gospel through it. But it was like, well, it sounds kind of crazy. I don't know if the people is going to get this message, this kind of message, because it is graffiti. So after that, I started to like look for Christian graffiti pieces and on internet. So that was the time when I got into like get more information about GG. So Gospel Graffiti, I was like, oh, I really like this work, and I started like to look that they were working with graffiti to share the gospel, like to share the gospel. After that, I was like, I got really excited with Gospel Graffiti because it was like they're painting, but they're also doing something with that kind of pieces, So I was thinking at that time, like, okay, I want to do these kind of things here in Guatemala. So after that, I remember I emailed them and asking how to get into graffiti, gospel graffiti. Like 5 years after that, I got a message from, I think it was Joel or Calmer. I don't remember. I think it was Calmer. So I got a message from them, from Gospel Graffiti, and was like, okay, there's a member that wants to go to Guatemala, to Central America. So you can like get in touch, that kind of stuff. So I think that was that time that we set up a meeting. Then this guy came here to Guatemala City. He was taking my place. I get into the Gospel Graffiti room.
Though it is heavily involved with gospel graffiti, the crew in Guatemala has its own organization called Amen Crew.
Amen Crew, it's a ministry. We call it ministry now. It's a group of artists. Well, yeah, that are using the graffiti as a tool to share the gospel. Yeah. So that's Amen Crew. We're 7 right now. Members, but now not all of them are artists. So since we started, like, we were 3 friends, like sharing the taste for graffiti. And after that was like, okay, let's do it as a crew and let's share the gospel.
Amen Crew is especially interested in reaching kids from communities rife with crime.
The most common thing here is the gangs. I don't know if you say that, but we call it in Spanish, we call it maras, like Mara Salvatrucha, Mara 18. So they're kind of gangs. So there are the most common gangs here in Guatemala. So it is so common, the graffiti, the rap, or like the hip hop in general is really common in this kind of things. So a lot of young people, they kind of keep growing up and looking at this kind of thing, this kind of culture. So as ministry, we kind of use this thing as a tool, like to share the gospel. So we kind of take advantage of this. We have like a year now that we're renting a building. So here's where Gigi is like getting into, like they're helping us with this. Like they're like helping with resources, with money sometimes. They're helping us to pay the rent of this building. So in this building, we do another kind of work. So it's pretty much about like have a space where young people can come and just feel like they can get in, like a place where they feel that they belong to, like a place where they can feel that they're important. So that's kind of the place that we have. So the thing that we do normally is like, as ministry, now at this time, I think we're now better organized about it. At the first time when we was kind of beginning with this, we were just doing some stuff because we were feeling to do that. But now I think we are better organized about it. Now we have like levels, like the first step or steps. Like the first step is like do a match with the people. Sometimes we're going out to any small town or community, and we do like some graffiti festival or any activity related to hip hop. So the first time that we have as ministries, as crew, is that we have the first step, that is do a connection, make a connection with the people in general. And then our second step is like show them that they have purpose. And the third step that we use is that we make disciples. And the fourth is like we show them how to use what they got to serve and share, So that kind of, in general, is our way to work here in Guatemala now. So, as I said before, we're going out sometimes to communities, to red zones, where most of the gang members are kind of living. We normally go and we are intentional with this because we look for walls or group of kids that we can go and play with them or share something with them, or even though looking for walls that we can go and paint. I will say that that's why we now have not only artists, but other persons that are helping us in the group. So besides doing art, we also do some activities with kids. Normally, we have some other friends in the crew. They really like to do like some dancing stuff as like, I don't know, it's like a tool where they kind of have the opportunity like to connect with kids, it's kind of the better ways. And even though sometimes we work with other ministries, also like join power to do a lot of stuff, like some other ministries as skateboarding. We have some friends that do that too. So we are like connecting with them in that kind of ways. After that, we're, like I said, we're painting also. We're not just sharing the gospel, but we're also sharing like art. And like they have any other options besides like just have to study or you just have to do soccer ball, like that kind of stuff, that kind of activities. Like, okay, there are some other activities that you can do as well. So that's kind of the other way that we work with kids. We have been also in jail. We have been invited to jail and paint some walls there too and share like them with the prisoners. What else? We normally attempt to some festivals that different churches are like setting up. So we go there and help them with that kind of part. So that's kind of our way to work here in Guatemala. And then after that, it's like we see it as a door that we can use to like get in touch with this kind of people, And so that's our opportunity to like share the gospel. Yeah, it's kind of beautiful the work we do here.
Camera One and Solar both mentioned hip-hop culture as entwined with graffiti culture. Matthew Pete, who goes by Mystery, is one of the organizers for Crosswords, a Christian hip-hop community based in Australia. Mystery has a foot in both Crosswords and gospel graffiti.
I wasn't raised Christian, and when I came to faith, I was a hip-hop head in every respect. I'm a b-boy and an MC as well as a graffiti writer, but there wasn't sort of much community for people that were involved in hip-hop. And we I would tour as an MC and do graph jobs around the place and meet other Christian hip hop heads that were isolated. And so we started this little community. I became a Christian in '88, but we officially started the community in sort of like the mid to late '90s. And then Crosswords started 18 years ago. I heard about gospel graffiti many years ago in a similar sort of way, like I'd heard about other Christian graph writers around the world. And when you Googled it, gospel graffiti was the first one that came up. And I knew some of the guys in New Zealand from it. And then when I went to the States, I ended up catching up with Camera One and Phasm and Cowboy and met some of the other guys as well in the US. And then over the years, when we've put on the Crosswords Summit Uprock, we've had various other writers come out, and some of those guys have been from gospel graffiti as well.
Art played an essential role in Mystery's story of salvation.
Yeah, so my family were all sort of like nominal in various degrees, and so, my grandmother was Irish Catholic, my grandfather was Jewish. The other side of my family were like very involved in Freemasonry, and so, I had all these different influences in my life. But for me, hip hop became my faith. I grew up in a very multicultural area in Sydney, and so not sort of understanding my cultural heritage at the time, hip hop became my culture. That said, I did identify heavily with my Jewish heritage as well, and went to synagogue and learned Hebrew and bits and pieces, but more from a cultural sort of ethnic sort of perspective. And then, like as happens when you're involved in some criminal activity like illegal graffiti, it sort of can be entry level into more criminal activity. And so, yeah, I started sort of heading down a bit of a negative route. Had a lot of friends, die, hit by trains or overdosing on drugs or, violent crime and different things like that. And then I just sort of started to question the solidity of my so-called hip-hop religion, where it was going to get me in the long run. And I just sort of put it out there to the universe, so to speak, at that time, and just said, well, what's the way to go? Do I pursue my Jewish heritage or my Irish Catholic heritage or the lodge or whatever? Or, I test drove a few other different religions and got involved in things that would be deemed occult and a whole bunch of different things. And then, ultimately Christianity seemed to sort of like, make the most sense. To be honest, I went to a church to collect money off a guy, and I was in the service. People started singing, worshiping God. I thought I was a bit of a gangster at the time. And I wanted to cry. And I was like, what is this? I had no sort of, lead in with Holy Spirit type of stuff. And I went, wait a second, this God thing must be real. Had a few experiences that I didn't become a Christian at the time. Left the church. A guy that was like the toughest guy in our gang did go forward to become a Christian that particular night. I left. I was almost killed a few times that week. And then I just I knew that if I faced God, I couldn't plead innocence. I knew that God was real, and so I had to make a commitment, But that said, I've never neglected my Jewish heritage as well. And so I still, explore that a lot. within a Christian context as well, Messianic Judaism, whatever you want to call it.
Like Camera One, Mystery is conflicted about whether illegal graffiti is inherently problematic. But for him personally, the answer is clear.
I've gone through various stages. So, there was a period where I did a bit of both. I did legal stuff because I do it as a job now as well. But I also sort of still had one foot in the door with illegal graffiti. And but then for myself, I just started to feel a bit uneasy about doing it. And now being the leader of an organization, I'm a pastor now. I'm a father of two sons and married. And also I do a lot of community work. And one of the things that I do is I meet with councils and government organizations to promote legal graffiti spaces and that for young people. So I just, all of those different things, sort of led me to think it probably would not be a great example if I was still involved in illegal graffiti. It's sending a little bit of a mixed message. But that said, I've never really been about telling other people what they should do in that regard. Early Christians, in the Roman era, did the fish symbol, wouldn't have been legal at the time, you know what I mean? But for me, at this particular time, I don't feel that is right for me to do, and everything that I promote is geared towards encouraging people to do illegal graffiti. But, I'm not here to run down illegal graffiti, and I still have a lot of respect for a lot of the OG talented kings and stuff like that. And I still have a lot of friends involved in that world as well.
Social media has been a huge driver for connection in the gospel graffiti world. One instance of this in particular, which kept coming up, is an event called Blessed Peacemakers.
A lot of the people that I've met have felt a little bit isolated, and so for them to sort of see that, actually there's other people that, can relate to what I do, appreciate what I do. We did an event last year and this year called Blessed Peacemakers. And what that was obviously it's a play on words with blessed are the peacemakers, as in P-E-A-C-E. But with graffiti, when you paint something, it's a P-I-E-C-E, so blessed are the peacemakers. Because, graffiti used to be that you have to see it live, on a wall or on a train or whatever it might be. Then it became graph mags and magazines were sort of like, printed and sent all around the world, and that's how we saw it. But nowadays it's online. And so we just sort of like encouraged as many Christian graph writers as we could around the world to just do pieces and just to hashtag Blessed Peacemakers, so that, we could sort of like see what everyone's doing. Also, it just made people aware that actually there's Christians out there that are doing it. Also, like some people chose to do more sort of gospel-centered messages in their pieces as well. So it was a way of communicating, the gospel, or people had scripture references and things like that. And the first year we did it, we had 11 countries represented and 55 writers. And this year, I'm still tallying it up, but I think we had 18 countries represented, and some of them weren't even the same countries as before. And I think about 60 plus graph writers. And that built the community, because once again, people hit me up and they were like, hey man, I'm a Christian graph writer in, Croatia. And we were like, hey man, we didn't know you existed. And he was like, I only just found out about you guys. And that sort of like developed the network, so to speak,
Mystery is a proud member of what is actually quite an old legacy of Australian Christian graffiti writers.
One thing that people might not be aware of is that Christian graffiti in Australia has a super long history with a guy that is sort of a luminary figure for a lot of us that are Christian graph writers in Australia, and not even just Christians, but even the graph community in general. So there was a guy named Arthur Stace. He was born in 1885, and during like the Depression, and like he grew up pretty rough, and was a ward of the state, and ended up in and out of jail, and was alcoholic and different things like that. Ended up coming to faith. I can't think of the year offhand. I usually know, but on the 14th of November, 1932, I think, might be wrong with the actual year, ended up hearing a message where there was a scripture quoted from Isaiah, which talked about, the sermon was called Echoes of Eternity, and it talked about the concept of eternity. 14th of November, 1932, he walked out of that church gathering, pulled a bit of chalk out of his pocket, went and wrote the word eternity on the ground. He subsequently did that. They estimate more than 500,000 times, 500,000 times. Died in 1967, and he was a believer. So like for one person to be writing, they nicknamed him Mr. Eternity. So his tag name, so to speak, became like a symbol of Sydney. And so on New Year's Eve for the year 2000, on the Sydney Harbour Bridge, when it went midnight, his tag was across the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And when we had the Olympics here as well, they had the eternity tag again. And so they've made 2 documentaries about it. And there's one that's just come out now called Written in Chalk, that was like just released a year or so ago. I'm actually in it talking about a lot of this stuff as well.
Oh, cool.
And so, like I actually did a track. I did a hip hop track where I tell his whole life story, and cool. With visuals, and actually at the end of it has him speaking as well.
Eternity, that saith the high and holy one, who inhabited eternity. I dwell in the holy place.
In 1885, the Genesis in tenements, then in Redfin and Hessian, sleeping under premises. The premise is the destiny will be on negative. The devil's in the detail, but we see the way the ending is. Arthur Stace, a baby born with many challenges: domestic violence, alcohol, and bandages. The family's affected by the damages of poverty. They're battlers, battling the malice and the ravages. The balance is tipped, weighing heavy on them. The family is split, causing many problems. It's not gonna get better in the long run, so his mother's next step is to send him to a home. One widow fosters Arthur when he's 7 down in Goulburn. He's getting older and his journey is unfolding. Working in a coal mine, trying to be golden, but he's bottled like a genie and it's keeping him revolving. A new job, new hotel, a new policeman, a new jail, a new fail, another reason to remain just the same. And so the seasons fail to make a change and keep on stealing all the freedom.
There's no word that is more passed by and ignored than the word eternity.
In the early days of the church, the symbol of a fish, the same fish which is stuck to the bumper of your favorite Christian soccer mom's Honda Odyssey, was used to signal a meeting place for followers of Christ. Ichthus, as it is more correctly named, was etched on cavern walls in various city buildings, places it had no business being. It was graffiti. All the Christian graffiti artists I talked to expressed feelings of isolation before finding like-minded artists. Just as it did 2,000 years ago with Ichthus, graffiti made by Christians is used as a tool to connect the lonely and the misunderstood. For those caught between the eccentric polytheism of the Roman Empire and a strange new faith which swallowed the teachings of a carpenter, and for those caught between the modern expectations of the church and hip-hop culture, somehow drawing on walls has brought comfort and community.
I think it just makes sense, for a creative God to create us in his image, to be creative. We're just being like Dad, and it doesn't have to be visual art. It can be anything. It can be music. It can be, like fashion. It can be, education. A whole bunch of different things. Like we have a direct link to the source of creativity, you know?